on YouTube. We have a lot of sessions going on, and this is one of our founder Unfiltered series, which we have started in collaboration with Fair Angels. Govind is here from the Fair Angels, and this is our episode 2 with Arnav Jalan to discuss on the Inagiify news, which he has started off. So welcome everyone. I would now ask Shruti to introduce herself, and then we can go ahead with the session. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Vanshika. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of this Founders Unfiltered series. Today, we have a really amazing guest. We have Arnav. And it might look like he's a founder, but he's actually a student who's turned a founder. That makes it even more interesting. But before I get to Arnav, let me just introduce Fair Angels again. Fair Angels, represented by Govind here, is a group of young entrepreneurs, professionals who've pooled their own capital together, and they invest in passionate founders like us here. And they really love to invest in companies which are disruptive in that sense. They come from a very, very amazing pedigree of colleges, and that's why I think their ability to pick out the right and the amazing startups comes through. They've been exposed to that. On the other hand, we have Arnav here, who will introduce himself in a bit with his life journey, but he's the founder for a very amazing website called Inagiify News. I'll actually let Arnav explain what they do because I think that'll be better. I'm the co-founder for Creators of Product. Please do join us on Slack. We're very active on Twitter as well. Over to you, Arnav. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And honestly, it's an honor to be here. I remember I joined Creators of Products a few weeks ago when a person called Manan actually referred me saying that this is a community you should join in. And I think that's where my journey with Creators of Products started. So I'm Arnav, like you've already mentioned. I'm a third-year undergraduate at Kriya. We're actually part of the first batch, so we're a pioneer batch at Kriya. And just to give a quick introduction of Inagiify News, I think the phrase we use to kind of talk about Inagiify News is it's your gateway drug to journalism. But if I have to say it in a more deconstructed manner, in simple words, we deliver news through GIFs and reels, right? That's essentially what we do. But yeah, happy to be here today and happy to answer questions.
We also have with us Govind. Govind, quick question. How did you even stumble upon something like this?
No, so Arnav is Bombay based and I've known him since a while. So I've been into education and people randomly reach out to me for advice on education. So I had randomly met Arnav a couple of years back when he was deciding whether to go to Kriya or not. Then we lost touch and then he started up again and that's when we reconnected. So education and Kriya University was how we connected, and since then we've barely been in touch, but the minute he started Inagiify, we found ground where we can help each other, and that's how I connected with Arnav.
I actually go back to Arnav now. Arnav, how did you come about doing studies, doing this, and now being able to actually run a company big enough to be noticed by VCs? How did the journey start?
I think the journey was back in 11th grade, right? Like Govind mentioned, I think I've always been a bit of a risk taker, right? Whether it's choosing a university, being a part of the first batch means you don't have any sense of security. You have to literally paint that blank canvas, right? I think that's where it started. I came to Kriya. I think it turned out to be a place where you actually have a very close-knit community, right? Just 112 of us and that 12 majors. And everyone's essentially talking to everyone, right? I've always been very much into entrepreneurship. Last year, I had stumbled upon an opportunity through WhatsApp channel when I was participating with the Harvard US India Initiative, which said, hey, join us and you might get a pitch to Steve Wozniak. That's enough of a catchphrase for me to join a Slack channel, right? I was paired up with 5 random teammates, few from IIT, few high school girls, someone from the UAE. And the next thing I know is we have to kind of come up with an idea to solve, to help an industry that has been hit by the pandemic, right? Peak COVID, August last year. And I was like, okay, the first day goes wasted in introduction. We have 2 more days, come up with the product idea. And I was just eating ice cream, watching the news. And I was like, hey, why don't we deliver ice creams to the vaccine industry, right? Because they were talking about how it's going to be a nightmare in controlling the temperature and whatnot. And that's how like my first ideation came up to be, right? So everyone was like, oh yes, let's do it. Obviously, I'm going to summarize it for you all. I don't want to waste too much time onto this, but we did research in terms of the container boxes, the sizes, how it's going to be stored, what is the ideal temperature for these vaccines. The fact that the main thing is that the ice cream industry is not just in metros. They have small stands in the most remote areas and they yet reach that, right? I think that was the beauty of it. And I think 2 days later, we realized we're in the top 5 teams out of 42 countries and 57 teams. And my team's like, you have to pitch Steve Wozniak. So unfortunately, it was on Zoom, but I think that was one of the journeys that kind of like started me off with getting recognized and understanding how to pitch live in front of an audience, right? Fast forward to Feb, I think I realized that the attention span's reducing across all my peers, and everyone started getting addicted to reels, right? Like everyone's just on Instagram watching reels, and I'm like, okay, interesting. And the next thing I know is that forwards coming in where people are talking about how if you take some Ayurveda products, I won't name the products, you will not get COVID, right? And I was like, oh God, like I get the fact about having GIFs and all, but you have to use it right? So I think it was like, okay, how do we get entertaining? How do we make news addictive, but also validated and relevant, right? And I think I was like, okay, let's do something around those lines. Fast forward to a few months in, we did a lot of market research, and yeah, now we actually deliver news through GIFs and Reels, and that's essentially what we do for a living, kind of. Hopefully,
that is so amazing. And no, we don't know what you were talking about the Ayurveda. I have no idea. I'll stay out of it.
Also, just one more thing before I forget, you asked about how we are getting noticed by angels, right? I think one thing that really came our way was like I've done previous ventures, which we might talk about later, but I think what I realized was there's this new notion which is called building in public, right? I think as a student, we're always scared about someone stealing our ideas and be very open about it. But I said, okay, I spoke to people, I said execution is key. It's not your idea that's key, right? So you might be a first mover, that's great, but if people rip it off, it's okay as long as you're executing it right? And I think when I started building in public, I think before launch itself, we had a VC based out of Singapore who said, hey, let's get in touch, right? And I think we didn't have numbers to show, and they were like, let's look at a 1.3 crore stake. 1.3 crores for 10% of your company. This is 2 weeks before launch, and we were like, wait, what? And they were like, let's stay in touch and let's get this closed by December. So we kept building in public. We that forced us to actually get into investor updates weekly and stuff. 2 weeks after launch, another angel reached out. This was from a New Jersey-based venture capital firm. And they had a similar offering where they were like, they even tried to give us the carrot and stick approach. And they were like, hey, we'll even get you mentors that are fantastic and whatnot. And, let's close this by October. Let's not wait till December. And I think these investor updates really work out. We do this weekly, and now we start doing it monthly. And I think that's essentially how we actually start getting noticed. Also because we use social media's fundamentals, which is reach, right? To actually leverage what we do and make use of the fact that they have high reach rather than having our owned and operated channels, right? So I think that was our motive. Use third-party channels to grow your reach and then eventually get them onto your own owned and operated.
So you're actually on the other spectrum where you have people reaching out and you are managing which one do I reply to. Most founders are on the absolute other end of that spectrum, wanting to talk to any and every founder that any and every VC that they can get their hands on. But I'm actually very interested. It's not a one-man company, is it? I mean, you've got people. Are they also students?
We have a 20 people company as of now.
Oh, wow.
And all of them are students, in fact. In fact, all of them are from Kriya University, which is my university. And around 16 out of the 20 are from a junior batch, right? They're second years, while we are the third years, the final students. So I think we're really leveraging the Kriya community there. I think it's also because it's so close that we're barely 400 in total across both the batches. And that way, there's a really tight community which you can leverage to talk to each other and also collaborate, because it's complementary skill sets with the same amount of rigor.
All right, someone's not on mute. Who would that be? Thanks, Rajat. Okay, go on now.
Yeah, I was just talking about the fact that we all are clear students, and I said that because of how small like both the batches are, because we are the pioneering batches, it's been a fun journey because all of us share the same rigor, and I think we all have complementary skills, right? So it's a lot easier to coordinate than to do external reach, right? So if we have an external team, it's different timetables, different scheduling, and then to get everyone on the same boat, it's a little more different, right? So I think this works really well.
Awesome. Govind, I think I've taken up your turn of questioning.
No, thanks, Shruti. So what I find interesting and what I wanted Arnav to share was, so he's from a business background in the sense his undergrad degree. He's gone to a new school. Plus, at the same time, he's learned coding and built it differently. So Arnav, how did you decide to learn tech? What did you learn? And do you think it's possible for people who complain we didn't do a tech undergrad to actually do tech quite easily?
What? No, I didn't know that. You don't. So you don't code, as in you're not a coder, like per se.
I'm not a but like degree, I'm not a techie. I think that it's been a fun journey, right? So I started learning about Flutter last year.
कोई पकड़ के ढंग का बंदा पूछो कि यार मुझे विला की वो चाहिए इन्वेंटरी.
Okay, Deepak, but could you please still go on mute while you do that? Thanks a lot. Yeah,
Okay,
no.
No worries. So yeah, I was talking about the fact that I'm not a techie by heart, like by degree, but I think that I've always been fond of tech, right? And it started off when I started doing just website design using no-code tools like Wix, and then I transitioned into Flutter. So I think Flutter was a side hobby where I was like, okay, you like design, and then how do you make design come to life, right? I was not a guy who would be like, I'd learn React Native, Java, CSS, too many coding languages. I think Google made all our lives easier by creating something like that. I think that's what I leveraged first, right? But I think we're yet working on the app side of it. For me, I think another booming thing that's come up in the startup ecosystem is no-code tools, right? So you don't need to like learn tech per se, and I don't think there's a need for coding as long as you figure out how to use no-code tools to your advantage, right? So there are a lot of these no-code tools which you use either for project management, for website development, or any of these things, right? And I think that it's very important that we leverage it because they're accessible. They're not as expensive as you'd expect if you're bootstrapped. And I think the main thing is that they have fundamentally very good tech supports. You don't need to worry if systems go down, which is something you'd always have to worry with your own and operated stuff. And I think that's what we're looking to, this is what we've been leveraging and continue to till we decide to get onto our own and operated app.
Yeah, shameless plugin. Our website is also on no code, and Shiv Kumar here, who's in the audience, he's helped build it up. And we are very, 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 very big supporters of no code tools. We use them massively. We first interacted with no code tools to create a website for the COVID relief. And then we thought, wow, this is amazing. Let's do it for our own website as well. So big supporter. Like, I did not know you were not a coder. I honestly thought the journey was the usual. I'll make something because I do this. Wow, that is amazing. Wow.
That's the backstory of it.
So Arnav, since we have a lot of participants who are on board, why don't you take us through just in a minute your website /newsletter/reel so everyone can see what it is?
Sure. So definitely, I think I'd be happy to screen share if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
So essentially, when we currently, we have our website, right? It's a very simple website. I think we again decided not to go with the conventional newsy style where it's not like just white and it's a lot of articles. We're like, let's go with a neon theme to make it a little more fun, right? Because I think the idea behind starting something different in news is we don't want to be like the others. We want to create a cultural shift, and we are like, yeah, we are a little youth-centric, we're different, and we want to start being a little more unique in our design philosophy. So I think dark theme has started exploding across, and we're like, let's go with that. But design side aside, I think, our website essentially has, we have a few categories: the editors page, global affairs, domestic affairs, technology, sports. And you essentially just subscribe to our newsletter and you start getting a daily newsletter, which looks something like this. So you'd get a carefully curated list of articles. One of the things we realized is that today you have at max, right? If you go to a news website or you go through any of the current short form apps, I think there's an echo. Okay. Yeah, but I think that you'd go through there are at least hundreds or 200s of articles daily. So you've got an overdose of content, right? So we're like, like how do we ensure that people aren't overwhelmed with content? So we only send you 8 to 10 articles a day, right? Which should be kind of holistic across the areas you've chosen, right? So you've got like RBI, you've got it talking about corporate tax, then you've got a bit about politics and the Kashmir state, right? Then you've got a bit of Tata, which is again 18,000 crores deal. Then you've got Apple with the Epic case, if any of you are Fortnite players. We've spoken about the Hyderabad airport, again a bit about politics, and then a bit about the current Malaysia approval, right? So I think that what we see is that we try to take a different approach, and then we use GIFs to kind of increase relatability, right? So I think people say, yeah, text, you can only talk so much. And then they say pictures speak 1,000 words. And then videos are like to speak 1,000,000 words, right? So GIFs are kind of that in between that's also relatable. While everyone thinks that we do GIFs just for relatability, we've also done a lot of research, and our click-through rates show that GIFs actually have more than triple the click-through rate of pictures when we did both. So like the side story is that even the organic reach of GIFs is a lot better. So yeah, I think like we just have a very simple, what I'd like to say, no BS newsletter. Nothing with, you'd have to worry or figure out something, very deconstructed. And then we also have our reels, right? So I'm I share like one of these. It's like, again, not a normal person just talking to you. Someone's going to be doing
he's the next
push-ups, someone's going to be like,
I am about to, yeah, I know.
yeah. So I'll just see if like my, I think I'll share sound. Sorry for that. Yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, I don't think I can hear this.
No, that's okay.
The Lakhimpur incident has united the opposition against the BJP. The incident in itself has been compared to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Headline number 2. The central government continues to insist that the PM Cares Fund is a public charitable trust. Yeah, it's not related to the government. ITR doesn't apply here. Headline number 3. India, as per a UNESCO report, lacks 11 lakh teachers in schools. Well, congrats to the students then, but no, genuinely, why do you think we lack so many teachers? Put your answers in the comments below. Then शिक्षक के ना आए सुधार, फिर मिलेंगे अगली बार.
So yeah, I think it's like a very different format that we've taken up, right? Like,
wow.
It's really consuming news in a way that's not ever done before with news. Right? It's not serious. It's not like Luke is saying the nation wants to know. It's a lot different way, like taking up an approach it's okay if he's doing push-ups, it's okay if he's in his boxers. The idea is relatable news. People can relate to him, relate to the way he speaks. And it's short under a minute, typically under 40 seconds. You've got your coverage, right? So yeah, I think our philosophy is very different. And I think we're trying to revolutionize the way both news is consumed and transmitted.
That's amazing. I think the closest that I can think is FinShots that does it for 5 minutes and does it in the exact same crisp manner. And I think their objective was also to make it understandably small. But I think they started the pre-COVID era, so they had 5 minute worth of attention span. Now with this world, you barely have a minute. So yes, I'm completely sold on this product as a understanding of why they would want to. That's amazing. Yes, Spandan, I think you are not on mute.
Hello.
Hi, Spandan. Can we take questions after?
Yeah, hi, Brandon. Yeah.
Can we take the
Yes, sir,
questions
yeah. So,
afterwards, please? All right, someone needs to mute him. That someone will. Thank you, Vanshika. All right, back to you, Arnav. I actually have a.
Sorry.
Yeah, Govind, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So Arnav, before we'll get back to your journey towards the end, so I wanted to ask you, we were discussing, and there's Signal that is raising money and has got pedigree investors. There's boring news. I mean, news has been a challenging category, right? There's InShots. How do you see yourself being different? What do you want to do differently?
So I think, like, great question, right? Like you said, there's Signal, there's boring news, and I think everyone's taking some approach or the other, right? Like, one thing you see with Signal is that they are very lengthy content, right? So I've subscribed to them myself. To just go through that, I typically read the first article and I'm out because I can't pay attention to the rest of it, right? I'm not saying that it's not great, it's just that it's not working for me. Sure, it works for a lot of people. And similar thing with boring news, right? I think they've done a great job with like breaking down news into very specific buckets. But I think that, again, our way of dissemination is not to put structures into it, right? Not like this is a one-liner or this is what you should do. This is more like, okay, this is just a few bullet points for you and relate it through just, right? But I think that's not a central pedigree. Like, that's not like what we want to feed people, right? Like, I think there's a certain niche of audience, which we've seen, like at least our newsletter, the average age group is 18 to 30. Whereas what you do see with our short form video, which is something that not many people have touched, right? Especially in this format, is that our central audience reduces to a very small niche, which is 18 to 24 there, right? And then what we see with our age split is it's 51 to 49, which is what we are very proud of. 51 males to 49% females. But I think that that's the difference, right? We don't want to be just a newsletter. I think we want to give people multiple avenues to consume news in a very different format, right? So GIFs is one angle and then Reels is the other. And obviously use trendy music, use 1 minute explainer videos. But the idea is to transition people from short form to long form, right? So a lot of you might be like, okay, we can anyways read an article. I agree, we all can read articles, right? But like Shruti said, like our attention span is so small. Like I would rather have just a small like explainer, like with a few bullet points of the GIF, and then you transition them to that reel, which explains that issue a lot more in depth in like 40 seconds, right? So we have two series currently, headlines of the day and then, deep dives. And I think that's the way we're going about it. We're obviously expanding our product offerings very soon and creating another product offering, which is long form video. But that's to come.
Correct. And Arnav, tell me now, everyone has different thoughts about monetization, right? Some people are like build quality, aage dekhenge. Some are like just grow users. Some are like, no, we want to be unit economics positive since day one. What's your thought on monetization, especially since it's a crowded space, somewhat at least?
For sure. So I think it's a very fantastic question you've raised, right? So when you look into the ad industry, luckily I've had like a bit of a, I think an added advantage because I've been able to work on a project directly with YouTube for the last 5-6 months, right? I have learned a lot about the digital ad space and also about monetization. So one thing that I've kind of understood about monetization is that it's all a numbers game, right? So you have to build a community before you look into ad monetization. I think my approach with monetization is we don't need to rush into it, but I think that we first need to, my main approach is we can start doing CPM deals on Instagram itself, right? Like we are getting upwards of a few thousand views per day. I think our average is around 3,000 to 4,000 views across our content pieces a day in a month. So we definitely can, but I think that what we're really looking to do is firstly perfect content, right? So we don't want to kind of get into monetization till we realize that whatever offerings do we have is to quality that we feel is up there. And I think it's the best at what we do. So if you see our first reel or our first newsletter to where it is today, huge change in a month, right? Because we take something called No News Thursday, which is a bit of a different approach, right? Like take one day off from your digital detox, take a digital detox for a day, and also give us feedback that day, right? I think we use that very much for our favor. But I think how we're different in terms of monetization because it's a crowded space is that we are looking at two different ways of going about it. So there are very few people who are monetizing short form video news. That's one thing, right? Especially on third party channels such as Instagram. It's not very crowded with the news that we are doing, right? That's one thing. Now, the second thing is that we also have a reader base from over 13 countries, right? So one thing that is there that a lot of news channels have their primary audience from India, which isn't the case for us, right? I think we're looking to build a global product, that is where we kind of take our advantage. We're building a readership, which is more of Indian diaspora, right? So we have readers from Canada, UK, US. And how does that really work in our favor is that obviously the CPM rates for a US reader is multiple times what it is for an Indian reader, right? I think that's how we're really looking to kind of diversify our readership, and that also helps with monetization, right? So I think we're very community focused rather than just giving out news pieces, right? Which is why we actually have a community team in our actual product teams, right? Which most news channels I think don't actually do. They aren't very focused on building a community because they already have one and they just look to retain it, right? But yeah, that's that.
Awesome. I actually am curious. Is there something different with the environment at Kriya, or is it because they support you in a particular manner of I'm sure studies is the main objective of that university, and yet they've been able to leverage your potential and let you and 20 others create this company. So is there an environment change from what traditional education is like? I'm really curious.
So I think it's an interesting question, right? So I think Kriya definitely has resources at your disposal like I'll give them that, right? So one thing is that a lot of the faculty are industry experts. So we have like professors like Prayag Akbar who've actually written like the Netflix documentary of Leila, like the show, right? So you've got people who are actually really experienced in that field, and I think they've been a great asset to talk to and get a lot of market validation. I think that definitely sets you up for a lot of success. I think that also has a different change in culture because unlike traditional education systems, you actually have a first name basis rapport with your professors. You don't say sir or ma'am or like any of that. It's just like we call them with their first name. I think that rapport really helps when you're actually doing discussion, right? I think that approachability definitely sets you up for like that. I think in terms of team building, I don't think like Korea has like a specific thing where they say you all need to kind of become entrepreneurs. I think they're very open to entrepreneurship. I think they're open to a lot of things. Entrepreneurs is one. And I think that because, we are again like the pioneering batches, it's also a lot of encouragement from their end because, we are at the end the first batch. So I think that definitely does play a huge role in that. And the main thing is all the students have a huge risk appetite, right? Like if you see all the students have taken the risk to come here, right? So I think that all of them are looking to kind of do something different. That's why they came to Korea. And I think that mentality definitely plays a huge role.
And this isn't your first rodeo, right? So I think you mentioned that there have been other startups before Inagiify. So can you just like Inagiify walk us through that?
Yeah, definitely. I think great fun usage there. But I think I did start 2 companies before this, right? So I think one shut down properly. I get into both, right? So one was called Mocha, like opportunity in Hindi, where we kind of thought that we'd allow students to come in from like all over the world. And we actually had students who came in from the US, Singapore, and whatnot. And we'd actually give them ideas that they can work on, right? And give them sweat equity. The problem was the second someone got their directorship role, they left, right? They basically went incognito and they weren't really accountable to it. And I think that was something we realized. So that was a bit of a flop there. I think the second one was a bit of a fun one for me. I think it was last March when we were evacuated from campus and I came home and I was like, okay, is there something that exists where I can take, I always forget it, my mom. I always forgot my mask, my sanitizer. I was like, is there something which I can create that's just like in my pocket, I have everything to keep, right? Like without having to worry about forgetting something because it was a nuisance to forget my sanitizer, sachets or my bottles when I'm leaving or like my mask. Like you just feel like, oh, I'm going to get COVID, right? And I think one of the things that I'm a bit of OCD about is alcohol salts. I like to sanitize surfaces. I think that I generally assume that people would not know about this and it'd be a great asset to have in your pocket. So I just went in, did a little research, spoke to 3 manufacturers, got a good deal, literally created a water-resistant pouch made out of windcheater fabric, which you can put in your pocket. We sold a cup like around 700 in like a month or 2 across India, and we shut that down profitably in March. And I think that was my second stint at entrepreneurship.
And both of these have been while at university?
Correct, both.
That's amazing. I mean, I know that there are incubator centers at most of the education places, but to have the ecosystem where you have the ability to do this, I think that's great.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think incubators is something that's traditional. I don't think unfortunately, we haven't had access to that, but I think that if you use Twitter and LinkedIn effectively, you won't have to worry about that.
Yes, that is true. Govind, what's your take on using Twitter and LinkedIn effectively?
No, so I think Twitter and LinkedIn effectively, they're becoming brand building tools for many. So how I would use them effectively is to gather intel, to run some polls, to get feedback. And the other end of it is using it effectively to build brands. So that's my view. And Shruti, Rohan's messaging me. He has some hard questions for Arnav. Can we get Rohan in? Is it okay?
Yes, we've reached that part where we start with the audience questions. Audience, you can always post in questions. You have the first one from Rohan. And that's a hard question.
How are you doing?
Hey Rohan, good to see you here. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Hello?
Yes, Rohan, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Rohan, we can hear you. Rohan, we can hear you. Okay, I think there's some issue with, I'll read out the question. How do you source your content? Are there any focus sectors you want to focus in? And what's the target audience? Rohan, if you can hear us back, we could hear you, but I've read out your question.
Right, should I answer? Or should we wait for Rohan? I think we can answer it, right?
I think.
Go ahead, Arnav.
Yeah. Okay. So I think like 3 very pressing questions. I definitely think that I've been asked this a lot of times, right? So we do have a complete editorial process flow. Okay, Rohan. Yeah, so we do have a complete editorial process flow, right? We have a whole editorial policy that's in place. So we do source our content currently. We don't we don't do actual reporting. And if you actually go onto our website, we even have further readings, right? But I think, like Rohan said, like a lot of people have been saying where you source your content. So actually from Monday, you'll get buttons on our newsletter. It says read more, and you'd actually get to see these sources. I think it's not restricted to 1 or 2 sources, right? So I think what the editorial team believes in is going through a lot of sources. I think it's around 6 currently. And then matching up like a lot of opinions and then creating their own opinion on it, right? So it's not like we're repurposing opinions, we're recreating our own opinions based on a bit of perspective that's already out there. Are there any focus sectors you want to focus on? I think like a great question. I think like that's the question between diversification and non-diversification. We've got feedback where people are like, we want genre specific news a lot more, right? So we want like 10 articles just in politics. And like some people are like, we actually just like what we are doing, right? Like we like general news. So I think what we're really looking at right now is to be a generalized news platform. But 1 week from now, we're starting with a theme called topic of the day. So at least on a third-party platform, which is YouTube and Instagram, we'll have like Crypto Monday, Sports Tuesday, Tech Wednesday, stuff around these lines. And we'd be having like an additional reel that comes onto these topics, right? But the end goal is definitely focusing on around 6 to 7 sectors, which include the environment, crypto, tech, sports, and a few others, right? So I think that's definitely, what do I not cover? So I think currently what we don't cover extensively is crypto for sure. That's one of the areas which we've been wanting to cover because I think NFTs is definitely something that's getting a lot of traction. I think Shiba Inu had like a 400% growth in like a week, and I think that's really interesting. So I think that like very deep dives into finance and investments is something we aren't covering. I think even though we do cover global news, I think that it is yet more India-centric currently, even though we do have a global audience reading it. So I think that's something we're looking to cover. So that's one thing. What is a target audience? So currently our target audience when we actually launched was anyone between the age of 14 to 30. But finally, we do have readers all the way till 58. That's our highest so far. So I don't think, like, even though we do have a target audience, I think that there is a larger audience that's interested in what we do. But our target is definitely, at least through our short form videos, is going to be the whole sweet spot of 14 to 30.
Awesome. And so from what I understand, you'll have to scale up massively to cater to this thing on a world level, because I mean, how do you even no, I mean, in the sense that what is a Jiffy-fiable news in India enough to take attention of whoever's under 40 is different from what that will be at the US.
True. Like, I think that is like, at least the markets are different, but I think that because GIFs are like widely used globally, it's not much of an issue to kind of adapt it to that, especially because we've got a lot of, funnily, our open rates, right? Like, I mean, the repeat open rates are the highest in the US currently, right? So you see, like, whoever subscribes in the US opens our newsletter. I have no understanding as to why, but a minimum of 4 times a day, which I'm here trying to figure out why. But
that's what they're sharing.
Yes. So what is funny about like what is, I think the target expansion with like global is we have like content ready, but we don't want to oversaturate content, right? So we have to be very thoughtful that we don't kind of overburden people with news and content. So I think it's a little more of like, how do you ensure we increase content without not increasing saturation on our content? And I think that is the kind of dilemma we're facing.
Okay, we have a question from Kishore. Kishore, do you want to call it out? Kishore, you're not unmuted, or otherwise I'll just speak your question, if that's okay. Okay, I'll still. All right. I think he's having trouble. I will just speak it out. Is Inagiify working towards anything that will help remove extremities in the news? Wow. To sort of remove biases, to display news with respect to context and perspectives?
I think like this is like the question I wanted someone to ask, even though I don't know Kishore, I'm happy you asked this. It is very relevant, right? Like a lot of people say, are you the objective news channel, right? And I don't believe any news channel can be completely objective, right? Like whoever is writing content pieces will always have their own biases. But I think that context and perspectives is what really adds a lot of value, right? So what we do, right, is something like you mentioned, right? So every time we're putting out, like, let's say we're talking about electoral bonds, right? And we're talking about how like there's been a huge purchase of electoral bonds for elections. Like there needs to be context of firstly, what are electoral bonds, right, to audiences? And then how electoral bonds evolve with time, right? And I think that's something we definitely do. Having a bit of perspective of who are these electoral bonds, we don't know who buys it, right? Only the government gets to know it. But I think that that's definitely something people need to understand, right? Like, so how are these parties getting funded? Now, when you talk about something as simple as like, I think it's a sensitive topic, but I think what happened in UP like very recently about like, farmers and a minister, like there's definitely going to be a huge bias of whether you're supporting the government or whether you're supporting the farmers. I think that's a very, very, very good question to have. I think that's where we put context, right? So what were the reasons that these farmers, like what are these farmers actually looking, like what is the reason as to why they were protesting, right? And what is the end goal of what happened? Were they offered government jobs? Was that really enough to compensate for the loss of 4 lives, right? I think that that's something that's a new addition to our newsletter, which we're having, is having context-related questions, right? So a question may be like, do you think the lives of 4 farmers was equivalent to a government job and a compensation of X amount? I think that's exactly what you're looking to do with context, perspectives, and objectification. And I think I'll take up Rohan's question. It says, isn't a no opinion piece journalism exactly that, an attempt to remove biases by reporting? It's true, right? When I say that we don't have opinions, I agree. Like what I'm trying to say is that we definitely have opinions. Like each writer, if I say that none of our writers have opinions, I'd be lying about it, because humans intrinsically have it. But because we have an editorial process where 3 writers go through the same piece, we have multiple opinions coming in, right? And we ensure that we do a bit of background where they, like before they join the team, we ask them whether the leftist writers, whether they have no opinions. A lot of these things come into play as to who's reviewing the content pieces. It's specifically that, right? So I think that's what we're looking to do. I think we definitely aren't going to say we don't have opinions. I'd say we have opinions, but we have perspective and context to back that up. And at the end, we aren't feeding you our biases or opinions. We're giving you questions to think about them and create your own one, right?
All right. I'm actually curious. Have you landed in any trouble yet?
Not. I think we've had like a few, I won't lie, like we've had like DMs coming our way with say, like, what are you talking about? Like, I think like a bit of like offensive stuff, but I think our social media team has been handling it like really well. I think you have to be sensitive to news pieces. Like we also start this thing called trigger warning, because a lot of people are like, wait, you've not given a trigger warning. You're talking about committing suicide. You're talking about murders. You have to do that. I think that was a learning curve. And I think that there have also been people who are like very sensitive to a certain party, and they've come up and sometimes they've commented, sometimes they've DM. But I think that is something we prepare, right? Like we knew that was coming our way. The second you're getting into the journalism space, you have to be prepared for hate, right? So I think that's for sure.
Arnav, I have a question, and it's different from what people have been asking you. So suppose now your editorial team and everyone is in their 20s. Suppose an investor comes, by that time you have significantly larger numbers, but he says, I can't fund a team of 20 somethings, right? But you have to change your leads. You can be there. How do you think it'll work out? Because right now, 16 of your 20 employees graduate 2 years from today, right? So how do you think that'll work out?
I think fantastic question, right? So I think like if an investor comes in, I think like we've done a lot of like behind the scenes research into what we want to do. I think it's going to be spent on customer acquisition, right? Like a majority of it. I think that because you said like a lot of us are here in college, we'd look at a monthly retainer, right? Which is yet going to be double of industry standards in terms of an internship stipend, right? So that keeps them going on a month-to-month basis. What really makes a difference is customer acquisition, because let's say we are able to get a lot of customer acquisition onto our channels, we automatically increase our viewership. The second we increase our viewership, we increase ad monetization, which means we can pay off our team, right? So I think the target is definitely to kind of become self-sufficient in kind of revenue and profits, rather than using investors' money to kind of...
So you're looking at keeping the same young team. You're not looking at getting an editorial lead who's 10 years in CNBC or...
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
All right, Rohan has another amazing question here.
What would encompass a job? I think, like, if I have to be modest and like if I have to be very honest, I'd say what's happening currently is a job well done, right? So what I mean by that is very autonomous, right? Which means that if I see that, like, what I consider well job done every single day is that, like, the editorial team wakes up, they have till 12:30, they figure out their content, they rewrite their perspectives, like they've gone through all the channels, it's reviewed by 1 p.m. The news pieces are handpicked that are relevant, like the GIFs are relevant to the topic, the videos are designed well, the context, the tonality, the performance of the video is engaging enough to keep them there. And at the end, the social media is all done on time and schedule, and then we're getting organic reach from hashtag. Right? I think that's a job well done. Especially if there are no typos, there are no grammatical issues, there's no issues in formatting, bolding, any of that. Right? I think, like, it's as simple as the fact that everything is going on smoothly, whether it's the newsletter and reels, and we're getting a reach and we're getting positive feedback, I'd consider that job well done. As long as it's not something that's controversial, that's been approved. And I think that one thing we have been steering away from is to not dive into entertainment or lifestyle, right? So I think, like, one of the things that have been happening is, for instance, there is a drug case that's going on, right, with a certain celebrities. I think that we do steer away from all of this. Like, we don't want to go into like Big Boss or like any of these stuff. Like, we do want to kind of stay away from all of this. And I think that as long as they are covering news that we kind of have filtered out in terms of categories that's going on is relevant, I'm happy. So I think that's what I encompass like a job.
So,
Yeah.
All right. So at this point, you don't want to go into MBA. You don't want to go into a corporate job. Are you beyond the point where you think that this is what it is? Like, I'm not giving up on this. Or do you still have educational aspirations?
I think this is a fantastic question. I think Govind has asked me this too, right? Like, I think I started this. I started the idea back in Feb. We launched in August, right? Weirdly, I applied for my MBA to Indian School of Business in Jan, and I even finished my interview in October, which is last month, right? But I think that after Inagiify's current trajectory, and I also have like a job offer lined up, right, with a startup which is into the ad space. But I think that, like, seeing Inagiify's trajectory, I don't intend on, following the conventional path. Like, I think that the current numbers, and I think I'm happy to share the numbers if that's okay with everyone, on how we progressed in a month. And I think, like, this keeps me going. I think that it's better to kind of do something that's not been done rather than follow like the herd, the herd mentality. And I think that it's always good to create impact. And I think that's what I'm going to do. But I'm happy to just share like a few numbers, right?
Yes, please. There's never a time where someone comes up and voluntarily does that.
Yeah. So I think, like, in 1 month, I'm happy to like
Wow.
to cross like 125,000 impressions, right? Our open rates, I wouldn't say is the highest. I think that one of the reasons we saw is that a few people are subscribed from like different email IDs, but they're the same person. But I think that, like, that's something we started like, working on. Our subscriber growth in daily active users is 200. Currently 13 countries. And I think we put out a no news Thursday where we see the satisfaction score of 4.3. Not the highest. I think that's something we're working on. The reason why I put out some of these companies, right, is very important because one of them is Journey, right? I think Journey is one of the actual like leading newsletters, and the head of growth is following us. And similarly, why I put in like Tailwind, because the ex-head of marketing of IPL has actually created Tailwind, right? So we are getting like noticeable corporate leaders to follow us, but also we're getting academia support, right? So you see like Indian and international universities. A bit about the audience, like I said, you have 51 to 49 ratio currently, and 63.4% is currently in our age group, which is up like 18 to 25. It's something we're happy with. Like, it is working with a target audience. Most of our readers come from the top 5 countries, which is there, and then like we have other visitors from like other countries. But I think like what has shocked me the most is we have one of the highest readers coming from Jalandhar, right? Like, we expected metros, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, and Delhi. We did not see Jalandhar being like one of the highest reader growths for us, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's fun for us, because most of our team is actually from Mumbai, Chennai, and Bangalore, and like very few from Delhi or Jalandhar. So I get if people are like promoting us in these places, but yeah, this is a fun thing for us to see, right?
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, now I have the most the generic question someone will ask. What happens when a big publication wants to create a GIF version of their news? They come to you, you say, no, I want to run this myself. They create something of their own. How are you going to ensure that one, you don't get acquired, and two, you don't get bulldozed?
I think this is the value of every startup founder that is kind of brought up, right? It's about like market dominant players wanting to enter industry with an acquisition or replicating it. We've seen this in the social media space a lot, especially with stories, right? WhatsApp has stories, Facebook, Instagram, everything does. I think very valid question, right? I don't think we're stopping someone from using GIFs. GIFs is as usable as it gets, right? I think that, like Govind mentioned initially, there are a few publications which never use GIFs but have suddenly started, which is a good compliment for us. But I think what we're really understanding is it's not as much as just about using the GIFs, as it's also about the tonality, the language, and how you put it out, right? It's a lot more than just the GIF. The GIFs is definitely a hook. It's about relatability and it's about click-through rates. But I think that the GIFs have to be complemented with good content. It has to be complemented with good design, and it has to be complemented with perspective-driven, like heavy news, right? I think that all of these things, including editorial policy, what we put out is definitely something. And like I said, our newsletter is one category, right? So while GIFs is definitely one thing that we use for like no BS news, I think that we also need to remember that a lot of the audiences are looking at Reels, right? So no one's stopping again anyone from using Reels. I'm sure a lot of people can. But I think that that's the difference, right? Like our approach where people are in their boxes doing push-ups, I'd love to see others replicate it. It's going to be a fun journey to see a huge shift. I mean, for me, I think it's going to be a success just to see others replicate it, because I think the idea of news in general hasn't changed, right? You've gone from print to digital, and now you've gone into video, but they all are the same, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, the delivery hasn't changed. So if everyone changes delivery, I think we've kind of succeeded in our intention of changing the way news is consumed, right, and delivered.
Okay, so I think Kishore has another question, and I know that his mic isn't working, so I'll take it up. A while back, when you mentioned multi-format news, is it only related to the delivery in audio, video, languages, etc., or also through multiple sources like Glance does on lock screens, or while on a call like Zingletunes does, or InShots trying through social aspect of a newer version? I can tell you what Zingletunes is. Who do you consider your big picture competitors? So should I just tell you about Zingletunes?
Sure, yeah, I think I haven't heard of Zingletunes.
Yeah, so Zingletunes is a company that came to us for AUP. When you call someone, currently you have that very nice lady telling you to definitely get vaccinated. Zingletunes bypasses that and tells you, according to your setup, whether you want to hear your own daily schedule on your calendar, or a tune, or something that happens while you're ringing the other person until the person picks the phone up. It's an amazing application. We tested it for them, gave them feedback. So I think that's what, and one of the things that you can do there is have news, which is this format.
I think Kishore, great question, right? Like I think everyone, like you mentioned, I think Zingletunes, InShots, Glance, everyone's doing a great job. I'm not going to take away from that. I think we don't like cut ourselves to think so early. I think that we will definitely, like, currently our focus is video and newsletter and GIFs, right? So I think we are expanding our videos with getting out more and more video production out. So I think our aim is to put 10 videos a day by December, right? And I think we're also looking to expand our YouTube, right? So I think what we're looking to start doing is skits, right? So instead of having, like, a lot of people know about stuff that's happening, right? But a lot of them can't relate to it, right? So we're thinking of having like proper skits of 8 to 10 minutes, which takes on a specific issue rather than giving you news in 8 to 10 minutes. We'll actually like walk you through the incident and have like small pauses for you to think about and talk about, right? I think like we are very focused on getting into vernacular currently. So until we don't focus on expanding vernacular or vernacular focused video production and ramping up newsletter, I think post that we can look at other forms of dissemination like Zingletunes and like, looking at all of these. But I think that definitely not our target currently. I think that that's something we might look in the long run. Again, I think like you mentioned about InShots and apps, I think we've had like a bit of a conflict and a dilemma about apps, right? Like I think that there's so many news apps, but I think a lot of people prefer newsletter, right? Like it's everything to you and it's just 10. Like when you do an app, you're worried about a lot of other things. So I think that we've always thought of an app, but I think that we're rethinking it given our traction with our current newsletter. But I think that we definitely look at expansion in terms of dissemination, but not yet, right? A lot of great ideas, but if we look at a big picture competitors, I think you've already mentioned, right? Like I think InShorts has a lot of eyeballs for short form, and then you've got a few others who've come in, like Govind mentioned, Boring News and Signal for newsletters. But I think that again, I wouldn't like to think we're in the same space, right? Even though a lot of people might think we're in the same space. So I don't think anyone's really looking at Reels the way we are. I don't think anyone's looking at newsletters the way we are. I think that we are going to keep innovating and try to create our own little niche. But I think that definitely these are competitors in the market currently.
So you're in college, and and if you've noticed a bit on Twitter, there are students, 15, 16 years old, who are up there running their company. What would be your advice to students in the same situation as you, only that you are in college and they're in school? I mean,
I think I have a few things, right? One is definitely stop chasing money, chase impact, right? Like I think I made the mistake in my first two ventures where you're only thinking about money, but then you don't focus on the product. And if your product isn't good, you're not making money, right? So at least first figure out what is your product trying to accomplish and how you're accomplishing it, right? I think the second thing is look at a long-term milestone with short-term goals. So a lot of people would only have either short-term goals, like when I started, okay, we want the YouTube silver play button. From there, we can do a lot of this. I don't think that's the way you go about it. Have a week-on-week metric target, so you know what you're targeting. Have team-specific targets, right? And I think have key results that you want to get weekly, and then have everyone understand the big picture weekly, right? That's another thing. The third thing is culture, right? A lot of us, in my previous ventures, is that you don't have a culture, right? So everyone's treated as just an employee, or they're not treated as with respect, right? I think it's very important that you build a culture where everyone's able to give feedback, because if your own team doesn't resonate with the idea, your product's not doing well, because they are the ones who are building. So it has to be very communicated. It's got to be a good culture. I think you have to have things like game nights. So you have what we do is a lot of our students, our community, right? They might not be very aware of a few news things, right? So we have a news discussion day, right, which is Thursday, and we actually get together on a call and actually do that, right? I think even get to know your team better, right? Not just in a professional sense, but in a personal sense. I think the last thing is build in public. Stop worrying about others stealing your idea. Trust me, it works out. Just start building in public and start reaching out to people, right? I think whether it's for feedback, whether it's for partnerships, whether it's somewhere you can help them, but just start reaching out to people and communicating your product, right? And I think that makes a huge difference. And never think you're the best. That's one thing we all start thinking at a point. The second you think you're the best, you're not going to grow, right? So always think you're not the best and find ways to grow. I think that's the way you keep improving. But yeah, those are my few small pointers. A lot of them might be cliche, but a lot of them might not be. So yeah, that's one thing.
That's our tweet storm right there. We'll just pick that up and tweet out. That was great. We've actually had questions on YouTube where they've asked, are there any roadblocks you face while starting up, and what are the upcoming trends in content? So the two separate questions. Let's pick the roadblock first. Are there any roadblocks that you think you faced?
I think YouTube's been a nightmare, if I have to be honest, right? I think we all believe that TikTok was great, then got banned. Now, Instagram Reel, everyone's we won't touch it, but it's doing great. And I think we've seen great traction there. And then came YouTube Shorts, right? I think we were expecting the same traction as we had on Instagram with thousands of organic views with a 6x reach to follower ratio. We had literally 10x, 1/10 of the reach to follower ratio, right? Horrible reach with YouTube. I think what the roadblock is that YouTube is not for short form. I think that's learning, right? I think people come onto YouTube because they want to take long form video, right? I think they want to stay on YouTube for a bit. They don't want to just swipe through a 30-second video, right? A lot of people want to see video that's different, right? They don't want to replace Instagram with YouTube. I think that's definitely been our first roadblock, right? What's trending? I think that we've done a lot of market research, right? So I think what typically trends is archivable content. That's the word I use, right? Which means that a lot of things that currently happen in the news world is unfortunately only relevant for a day or two, right? That means that if you actually go on to the biggest news publishers in India, a lot of the average views are 4,000 to 5,000 views a day. Surprising. Then you see things like unfortunate incidents that happen, like the 2611. They have upwards of 20 million views that keep increasing, right? And that's why they keep monetizing. And I think that's where the trend is. Create archivable content that's relevant for a long period of time, rather than creating content that's just valid for a day or two. And that's our approach with YouTube starting November, right? I think that's where we're looking to differentiate. So we will create long form. And like I said, the skits is one idea. It's a new form of discourse. So I think that's the approach, right? Like, don't just follow the bandwagon of short form. Know what the platform is known for. Know the trends. I think the main thing is also learn archivable content is the future, which a lot of us don't understand in news.
All right. Govind, you've not asked a question for a while, and I think I've taken up the entire time.
No, Arnav, so you've already shared your message of that you want to build this and you're not looking to go to a business school now. Tell me, how would it all work out for you? Would it be you running this successfully, bootstrapped, you raising money once and then getting strategically acquired? Who are your dream investors? I mean, what's your best case scenario in the broader
Best case
metrics?
scenario, I think the best case scenario is Rajan and Anand and team kind of comes in with Sequoia and kind of leads our pre-seed, right? I think that's the best case in March. I think that would be like honestly the best, only because of a few reasons. Like obviously Rajanandan has its name, definitely, right? But I think more than that is his expertise, right? Where you look at Google, Microsoft, where you look at the roles he's like, where you look at his journey. I think our best case scenario is to look at a good valuation with March, right? So I think like I'm looking at a valuation. I think given our current valuations of approximately 13 crores, obviously upstake that with getting more users on board. I think like use the first money on customer acquisition, right? To build a community and launch more and more video there, right? And increase our monetization potential from there. I think use that as leverage, right? So I think our dream investors are not just investors, but also mentors. We don't want someone to come in and be like, here's the money, and that's it. But even if they can kind of strategically help us, I think that's something we're definitely looking for. Best case scenario, 5 years down the line, not even 5 years, I think 2 years down the line, we kind of beat up now in kind of the first, like the youngest, the fastest unicorn trajectory out there. And I think with revenue there, I think that's definitely what we want to do. And I think we become the global phenomena of consuming news sites, right? I think we keep going with the phrase that we want everyone to consume news in a jiffy, right? Whether it's through our newsletter, whether it's through our YouTube offering, whether it's through our reels. And I think that's the global goal, not just, starting. And then, I think that plans to, grow really into vernacular, not just in India, but also abroad, right? So get really niche languages on. And I think really reduce the time lag. I think currently we have a 12 to 14-hour time lag. So make that into a 2-hour time lag with when, we post out stuff. But end goal is definitely getting our first pre-seed by March by Sequoia team there.
Very ambitious and feeling fresh on a Sunday morning,
Yeah.
So, Shruti, back to you. Yeah.
I think we just have one more, and this is usually a standard question from the founder of Creators of Products. As a founder in your own company, how do you differentiate and keep your mental balance, keeping your personal and professional life separately? And I think in this case, a student and the professional life separately.
I think fantastic question, right? I think work-life balance is something we all struggle to, and I'm not proud of it. I think that it's not an easy thing to do, especially because one is you're talking to people in your own university, you're seeing them day to day, either in classes and then you're in them. So how do I really maintain a work-life balance? I think firstly is remember that nothing is personal, right? So if I am not happy with something, the team member doesn't take it personally, it doesn't affect it, right? Like it's not about me hammering them, it's the work, right? So always remember that whenever we're talking about stuff in meetings, it doesn't matter whether you're my best friend or I hate you. We're talking about work and that's the end of it, right? I think that no personal reasonings or relationships, any of that comes into play. That's one thing. Second thing is always remember that no one gets burnt out, right? You never want that. Why do we have such a large team? It's because we have a cap on working hours, right? Because we're all students. The cap I have currently is 2 to 3 hours a day. No one spends more than that and no one interferes with other commitments, right? So that's my cap on working hours. So I think working hour caps is definitely one more thing. And I think the other thing is you've got to merge a bit of the both. I can't say that you can only be professional with your team and you can only be personal with your team. If you don't know your team personally, it's going to be hard to work with them professionally. So we use this tool called Gather Round. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like this one-on-one icebreaker tool where you kind of get in. I think it's got a 50-player free capacity. It's a free promotion for Gather Round, even though they've not done anything here. But yeah, I think that works really well. So it's like they have placards that you kind of have, and then you just kind of interact with the team members once a week, whether it's a all hands meeting or anything. And I think that's very important. And then we also are very thankful to like Rohan Suri from Nooks, right? So we tied up with a company called Nooks, which is a virtual office. So you can actually imagine me sitting by a pool in Goa and like just screen sharing like Google Slides. I think that work culture is really working on. So yeah, have a cool virtual office. Don't just use Zoom and Google Meet. And I think that definitely like changes the atmosphere, to say the least. Have like the waves playing in the background, but yeah, make sure work is fun. Don't do it just for the heck of it.
Yeah, I think I've used Gather once, and I know what you're talking about. And you're fully remote, right? You've never
fully remote. In fact, like there are
Wow.
barely 2 other people from Mumbai. So yeah, I've not even met half my team in person ever. Unfortunate but true.
Okay, that's great. I think we have one more question that has come in from
Sure.
YouTube. So where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
5 years from now, definitely being a unicorn and being the largest news aggregator in terms of news community.
No. I meant 5 years, not 5 months.
5 years. I think 5 years from now, I think it's going to be very, very different. If I have to say 5 years from now, it's going to be probably also getting to actual coverage, right? So one thing I've told my team, and I think that this is something I always get trolled for, and I'm happy if creators of products and everyone watching this trolls me, completely all right. But 5 years from now, I'm hoping to have a full camera crew and actually start, using this whole way of going about it and getting into like really risky stuff, right? So whatever's happening in Afghanistan, send a team there, make them live with like, what's happening there, and get coverage there. I do risky stuff that's not done and get insights I've never done. But one thing which people always call me crazy for is I think we're really looking to change communication and not just news. I believe that we are creating a communication monopoly. We're starting with news because that's where you build credibility. I can't start with research or like magazines and say, hey, I'm a news channel now. Doesn't work, right? So I think what our eventual 5-year goal is, we tie up with all universities, tie up with research centers. We re-communicate every single thing. If there's a new research, if there's something about a new vaccine, if there's something about entertainment, if there's some trends, if there's demystifying things, anything about communication, like research papers, every jargon that exists, government policies, Instagram policy, Facebook policies, re-communicate everything. I think that 5 years from now, I see us as a communication monopoly. And I think that's what we hope to kind of, use as we go forward as motivation. So yeah, definitely not just news, but every place communication.